My name is Jimmy Allen, and I am accustomed to public speaking. As I was driving along, realizing that I was going to be late, I remembered a conversation not too long ago with a friend whom I met, who said, "Jimmy Allen, you're still alive? I didn't know that." And I said, "Well, why didn't you think I was alive?" He said, "Because I talked to somebody the other day, talked about the late Jimmy Allen." And so I am the late Jimmy Allen. I sat here with wonderment in my spirit as I listened to this discussion of what we know about HIV/AIDS today. Because when I was the executive of the Southern Baptist Radio and Television Commission, after doing a lot of other things that I don't have to tell you about, I was coming home from Nashville, Tennessee from a meeting, and got the word as I got on the plane that my grandchild, who was in San Francisco, had just born, was diagnosed with this strange disease that everybody was talking about that was happening among gay people in San Francisco. That was the place that disease had been lodged in our minds. And I found out that my little grandson, who had just been born, was diagnosed with HIV, which we called AIDS. It was an unbelievable moment. My son was a student at Golden Gate Seminary. His wife, who was the mother of Matthew, was a pediatric nurse in San Francisco, and the process by which the baby got HIV was a blood transfusion. He was born early. They were having difficulty with birth. They gave the blood to him, given by some well-intentioned person with HIV, and he gave the blood. We never did trace that. He gave the blood, and when Matthew was born, when Brian was born, there are two of these guys, Matthew and Brian. When Matthew was born, he was diagnosed with AIDS. I went home to tell Wanda, my wife, and the grandmother, that the difficulty she was having with some household chore was not our problem. Our problem was that we had a grandbaby out in California who had a deadly disease that was a shame to talk about. And that became a burden of a secret. That was the title of my book, A Burden of a Secret. I'm going to have a hard time with this. Anyway, we immediately went out to California and discovered that he was pastor of a church out there, that they were wrapped up in this kind of a problem. From the very beginning, it was a secret. It had to be a secret because rejection was inevitable. The Bible says that perfect love casts out fear. I found out by real experience that fear cast out perfect love. Because the fact was that people who were afraid of something they didn't know about, didn't know how to deal with it, began to reject from the very beginning. And so we found that in the time Scott and Lydia moved to Denver, he was assistant pastor of a church there, and they kept trying to care for the child. And when they found out about the AIDS thing, they fired Scott. And this was really a blow. He'd gone out to Colorado to help with a camp as an assistant director there, became the minister of youth for the first Christian church of Denver, Colorado. And when the pastor found out that this AIDS diagnosis came, they fired him. And so he had no place to go. So they came to live with us, and we dealt with them, having to figure out what to do, how to help him, and how to help them through that process. The story unfolds with the fact that Brian died, and Matthew survived until he was 13 years old. Matt was the first child who was allowed to go to the public school system in Dallas, because we got together to say, there is no threat that we know of to anybody, and every child has a right to education. And so we became the test case, and the school board, the school superintendent did a very, at that time, very brave thing. He decided to let him come into the magnet school, the little children's magnet school. And so while all the kids in the neighborhood around him went to this school, he had to go down to the magnet school in order to be there. And you try to explain that to a little 6-year-old and see how that works. The thing that I'm wanted to talk about, though, is the church and the HIV challenge. You see, I knew every pastor around. That was part of my public life. So I picked the church pastors that I thought were progressive, ready to take new ideas, courageous. Well, I was in the midst of the civil rights thing. I knew a lot of folks who were out there with me in it. And in the process, there were a lot of these folks that I knew if anybody could do it, these folks could. So I went to every one of them and just laid out the issue and the presence. And every one of them wanted to do, and none of them managed to do, because they knew that the fear that would cast out love was present in the life of the church, and they didn't know how to do it. One of them wanted to have what was in that day, the only way you could do it was through tapes. He wanted to videotape the Sunday school and then play it in the home for my little grandson, if you can imagine that. To separate a child from a play group because he's not acceptable, and then send him a picture of the play group. It was just unbelievable, but it was the best he could come up with. They finally, after we got through with after the magnet school time came, the Ryan White case was coming through. There was a federal level of acceptance of the responsibility to help the children of that nature. So with that background, we went to the public schools, folks, Scott and Lydia did, and said, we don't want a special treatment for this child. We want this child to go to school like everybody else does. And so he did that. He went to school. The good thing was that the people in the school had more real Christianity than the people in the churches. The school principal was a member of a Baptist church there in Dallas. She had always wanted to be a missionary, and so she poured herself into the idea of protecting Matt, of helping him to be a part of everything that everybody else was. And he was. He grew up doing all the things everybody else did. Didn't do it as well. Tried to play left field in the little class, all of that. But he and I, and of course, we had to have a special relationship. And so I went through the fear of not knowing what was going to happen. What would happen if I got AIDS by dealing with my own grandchild? So I just went out to talk to the Lord about it and decided that's worth it. It's worth it. Your love does cast out fear. And it did cast out fear. So in the process, I became aware of the fact that we needed, as a church family, to come to